Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I'm going to show you some clips from my games, some complete games maybe, but definitely some highlights from a tournament I played in this last weekend in the Chicago area. So I had mentioned that I was successful in this tournament. I won with a 4-0 score, and it's a nice result, although it's perhaps not quite as impressive as it sounds because I had the good fortune to avoid the top seed. I was the second seed. And some of the players who were closer to me in rating. So I only had to play one other master. That was Alexander Stamnov in the last round, and I won that. There were four of us with 3-0 going into the last round. It was a one-day Game 61 or Game in 60 tournament. The last round, I played Stamnov, and Felikin, Florin Felikin, who's an IM, was the top seed, had to play Al Chow, and they had a really harrowing game. And both of them were just extremely short of time. They were basically living off of the time delay. And I forget who offered the draw. I think it was Chow, but it might have been Felikin. Anyway, they were just happy to get the game over with. It was really, like I said, a very, very wild game. And my game with Stamnov had some tense moments as well. Anyway, I'll start with round one. And in this game, I'm black against Matthew Holloway. So it was kind of a warm-up game. He was 1738, so certainly not a bad player, but a big enough rating gap that as long as I'm in decent form, I should pull out. So this game I'm just going to show from a certain moment. So we have this position here. He just played bishop to f5, and I brought my bishop from d7 to c6. So it looks a little bit scary. You've got these two bishops pointing here on the long diagonal. On the long diagonals, my rooks are on the only open file, well, the only half-open file I've got. My queen is hanging around the general area of the king side, but it's also not really clear what all of this, what all these pieces can actually do where they are. So black is better. I think the bishop here, in particular, is a nice asset. One idea, if white doesn't do anything really special, I mean, one idea might be to simply play g6. And maybe h5, move the queen and play h4, or alternatively, there might be lines with f5, f4 to fully open the e file and also to open this diagonal more fully. So there are a number of plans that black has. Certainly white is going to have to do some suffering here, but the game should go on for quite a while. I mean, there's nothing really immediate going on just yet. Now, there are ways that white can collapse, I suppose. This is, of course, a completely ridiculous line, just as a joke. But just to show, well, actually, it doesn't even work, so never mind. I'm trying to find some way to, well, okay, all right, I'll find some really cooperative way. Okay, let's say bishop to d3, rook here, and, gee, how can I make this fully cooperative at this point? All right, b3. Rook takes, which doesn't really work. Bishop takes, of course, here white can play rook to f2, but let's say this. Well, then there are tricks like this. All right, but this is obviously requiring a lot of cooperation, but it does show a possible mechanism. It shows some of the tactical vulnerabilities in the white position. So that line, as I said, was really a bit of nonsense. But here's a line, well, we'll see what happens in the game. It shows that there are other tactical possibilities. So white played queen to e2, and it's kind of funny. I didn't think of this move. I mean, I saw immediately what the problem with it was, but I had seen queen to c3, and that was a move that I was, I didn't really entertain any real prospects of this happening, but it has the same refutation, so I thought maybe something like that. Anyway, queen e2 falls the same way. So hopefully you see it. If you don't, you might want to take a few seconds, calculate everything out to the finish. The winning move is, of course, rook takes e3. So probably white's best is maybe just to run the queen away and suffer, although I'm not actually sure that he can do it, because if he plays queen to d2, for instance, then I might be able to play, well, I'm not sure if this is good. Rook takes, pawn takes, queen takes. I think he just plays bishop to h3. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can do anything too special here. Maybe rook up and over will work. Rook to e5, followed by rook to h5, or maybe even rook to g5, or bishop takes g2 and then rook to g5. My bishop covers e8, so rook d to e1 doesn't really help. So maybe I could do that. But anyway, at the very least, I can just retreat the rook and be a pawn up with a great position. Anyway, in the game he played f takes e3. I took with rook number 2. So right now I've got 2 pawns for the rook, but I'm threatening the queen, and I'm also threatening various discoveries with my rook because of this long diagonal. So he played queen f2, which sort of pins the rook, but not really. Of course, this I had to foresee. Rook takes g3. And so the point is, obviously, if queen takes a7, rook takes g2. So there are those 2 bishops slicing away, and the queen pays off as well where she is, because this is checkmate. So he didn't do that. He played h takes g3. Okay, and now here I could play queen takes g3 with the point that, again, if queen takes a7, queen g2 is mate, and I'm threatening queen g2 mate here, but I didn't really see anything fantastic after bishop to h3. I mean, of course, I take the queen, but even though I have 3 pawns, 3 extra pawns, queen and 3 pawns for 2 rooks, none of my pawns would be passed. So it seemed to me a better idea just to take on f2 and then take on c4, leaving him with the double g pawns, and now I have a passed d pawn, and I'm also threatening the pawn on a2, and I'm threatening queen c5, kind of. So from here, it's fairly routine. So just to kind of quickly zip through the remaining moves, b3, queen c5 check, king e2 is forced. If king e1, queen e3 is a cute mate. So king e2, bishop to b5, forces this, okay, and this forces king e3. Because, of course, if he plays rook to d2, then I can just take. And, all right, winning much more material even after this. I could either play queen c5 check, and then if he does this, play there. Or probably I would just play the simple and lazy exchanging procedure there. So, okay, he plays king e3, and now I take, and then I take on g2, threatening the rook and the pawn on g3 and the pawn on a2. He plays rook f3, and I play queen a2. Now, if black had far fewer pawns, then there might be some interesting possibilities of some kind of fortress with the 2 rooks on the 3rd rank, preventing any of the pawns from getting passed, but I just have too many extra pawns here. It's not going to hold. So he plays on a little bit, king d4. Okay, make sure we don't get back rank mated. Rook c3, c6, and now he plays rook f6, which is a blunder. I mean, it doesn't really matter here. It's as long as I don't just do something unbelievably bad, it should be a pretty routine win anyway. But this gives me the chance to win with some cute geometry here. So yeah, the rook on f6. I mean, it just feels like, it's king in the middle, and it's almost in a mating net, and his rook's kind of split apart here. Like there should be something, and there is. So queen to d2 check. Now, if he plays king to c4, queen to d5 is mate. So rook to d3 is what happened, and now queen to b4 check. Okay, he played king to e3, and now I played queen to e1 check, and he resigned because he's either losing a rook or getting mated. So if king f4, queen e5 check picks up the f6 rook. If he plays king f3, I play queen f1 check, and then he can lose either rook, so it's up to him. Well, it's not up to him. I can take the f6 rook no matter what, but he could give me the option of the d3 rook too. And then finally, if he plays king to d4, then I have queen e5 check, king c4, and still another cute mate with queen to c5. So for that reason, he resigned after queen to e1. Okay, so that was round 1. Let's turn now to round 2. This is against Greg Bungo, and this was kind of interesting. I was originally paired with an unrated player, which just was a clear pairing error, but I guess the program thought or rated the player based on his first round results. So he had beaten, I think, a 17-something in round 1. And so I was originally paired with him. I think his name is Alex Ding. So a high school player, I think he was a senior. And so, okay, I thought, well, all right. He sort of estimated his own strength to be around 1800 or so, maybe. So I thought, all right, it's maybe a slightly easier pairing than I would normally get. But, I had mentioned it to the director that this seemed like a strange pairing, and he ended up repairing me, and I think I got even a higher rated player than Felican did. So I got Greg Bungo, who's a 2015 rated player. Well, I was, as I said, originally a little disappointed by this, or felt like it was maybe a little bit of bad luck, but it probably was actually pretty good luck because Alex Ding ended up going 3-1 in the tournament. Barely lost to Chow in round 3. Well, I don't know if I should say barely. I didn't see enough of the game, but it was a long, hard game. And then he beat Trevor Magnus, another master, in the last round. And his provisional rating from the tournament was 2286. So maybe this was actually a good break. All right, well, whatever it was, let's take a look at the game that I actually did play. So I had white and decided to play this kind of this Rossolimo sideline. I don't know that it promises really much of anything, but something for variety. Okay, and yeah, this is a little bit of a strange variation for black. Normally, instead of e6, black plays either knight to f6, e5, or knight to d4 here. Those are the three most usual moves. So after e6 takes, e5, I think white should be a little bit better now. So he can't play d6, and I'm going to play knight to e4 shortly. So this is a little bit uncomfortable. Probably he should play f6 here, or f5. Probably f6, though, to force the issue. And, okay, it's a battle then between... Well, I still may play knight to e4 in that case. I'm not positive. Maybe rook to e1. Anyway, another idea is d4. So anyway, lots of possible moves there. But f6 has to be played, I think. If he just allows me to play knight to e4 without really challenging my control over these dark squares, then he's going to be in some trouble. So he played knight to e7. And after knight to e4, I mean, black already has some difficulties. But he chose the right way to go here. So he did not save the c5 pawn, and he was absolutely correct to jettison it. So he castled. I took, and he played d6. And after takes and takes, it's not quite so trivial to maintain my coordination. So he's got the bishop pair, and he's got the possibility of playing e5 and f5, so he can get a nice little grip in the center. So I really wasn't sure how to handle this position. Took me a while to come up with a good plan. So I played knight to e4. If I play d4, I think my concern here was what? I think it might have just been e5. I mean, e5, I think. There's knight e4, queen d5, knight c3. So maybe it was rook to d8 first. But yeah, I just didn't like that he has these levers against his pawn on d4. So, and the thing is, there are some lines where maybe I'll play c3, this knight's retreated. Well, in those cases, the bishop can come to a6, the queen's on d5, and he gets this good, or he gets counterplay on the light square. So I didn't really like that. So I was trying to keep the position really, or keep his position from really, from giving him any targets in my camp here. So I played knight to e4 and then d3. So just kind of a restrained approach. He played f5, and all right. So I came up with another idea. So I played c4, queen d7. This was a good move. Yeah, certainly he shouldn't go to a5 because then I could play knight to d6. And yeah, I'm trying to remember why I didn't think much of queen d8. Queen d8. Oh, well, then I can just play knight c3 and he can't double. So queen d7 was the right move. Even though it's sort of inviting me once again to jump back to c5, again, this is really not where I want to be, because after queen d6, d4, again, it seems like there are possibilities with e5 or rook to d8. So he just gets to take all these swings. So here, for instance, there's maybe this, if knight e4, queen b4. Actually, no, this line I didn't mind at all. This line I think I should be happy with. But, yeah, not f4, but again, e5. Seemed to me a bit inconvenient. So lines in this general vicinity seem kind of unattractive. So again, I kept thinking and found what I think was a good solution. So I played knight to c3. All right, he played rook to d8. Now, my first idea, I mean, before this point, but when I was thinking about this a couple of moves ago, was to play queen e2. All right, so this is just a cheapo. Well, actually, I looked at various queen moves, like queen to a4, queen b3, and so on. With the shallow trick, queen takes d3, rook to d1, game over. But instead, he can just play bishop takes c3 first, if he wants, and then take. And there's no mate, I don't think. So Well, I can't play rook to d1 anyway because he just takes the rook. So this was not really my idea of fun. I guess I could play queen to e5 here. That might be somewhat similar to the game. So maybe there's something to that. But at best, maybe this is going to be like the game. So anyway, I played d4. So he takes, I take, he takes, and then I played queen to e2. And, well, I'm going to play rook to d1 next, so that's a winning threat. Also, bishop to g5 is an annoying threat. So he played queen f6, and now I play bishop to f4. Bishop d7, bishop c7, rook d to c8, bishop e5, queen f7. Okay, and you can see all my pieces are going to perfect squares here, and I'm just winning in this position. But I got a bit careless here. So white to move. I had really wanted to play knight to a4 just to complete the squeeze here with knight to c5. That's why I had done that little bishop c7 thing. So when he goes back to d8, he wouldn't have time to have played rook a to c8 and then c5 when my knight was on a4. But while this gives me this nice bind, I could have just cashed in, I think, with bishop to d4, threatening queen to e5 and threatening queen takes e6. So that would have been best and simplest. So this was a bit too academic, you might say. So you don't have to just squeeze the guy to death. You can actually just, win the game. So he makes the only moves here. And now while my position is quite nice, it's not over just yet. Okay, the reason for b3 is that if I play bishop back to c3, hitting this pawn, he plays e5, take, and then the pawn on c4 is hanging. Well, knight takes, queen c4 in some cases, but probably I should play bishop c3 anyway. Anyway, so I played b3, and he played this, and now he's made a little bit of progress. So, yeah, I didn't really play this the best way. I don't really ever let him completely off the hook here, and I'm still clearly better, but I could have had much more than this. So here, though, he's been suffering for a long time, and he was in time trouble, and as often happens, when you suffer for a long time, eventually something cracks, and it did here. He played a5, and now it's just easy. Knight b7, takes, c5, bishop c3, and I'm just up a pawn. I'm going to have two connected passers on the queen side sooner or later, and he's still got his dark squared problems on the king side. So he played e5, queen e3. So I'm threatening the g pawn and the c pawn. Well, also threatening the e pawn too, for that matter, but I only want that under ideal circumstances. He played e4. Of course, I took. Takes, and two pawns down with a lost position, and the f5 pawn ready to drop as well. He resigned. Okay, so that put me at 2-0. And now we turn to round 3. Again, I'm black, and this is against Isaac Braswell, who's a 2086 player. And this was kind of a funny game, so I would normally skip ahead a bit, but the first key moment occurred on move 4, believe it or not. So remember, this is game 60, or game 61, I guess. Well, the director had to set the clocks, or had the clock set at an hour and 1 minute per side. Anyway, so after I played the Schliemann, which, as many of you know, I'm wont to do from time to time, so it's not the only thing I play, but I like to wheel this rubbish out every so often for entertainment value. And here, my opponent thought for 25 minutes. Unbelievable. So, if it was a 1286, I would understand that maybe. But a 2086, I mean, a really very good player. And, you would think a player of that level would have some pet line ready for the Schliemann. I mean, it's not that rare. Certainly in Blitz, it's quite common. But he thought for 25 minutes. Anyway, he ended up playing for quite a while along the lines of theory, kind of an old-fashioned line. So he played d3. I trade, play knight f6. He castled, which is correct. Bishop c5. Now, the main move nowadays, and, well, for most of the past decade, has been queen to d3, or sometimes queen e2 with the same idea of bringing the queen to c4. But he played knight c3, which is the old-fashioned move. Also what Udawson played against me many, many years ago, back in 2002. So d6, bishop g5, castles, knight to d5, and here the move that I didn't do against Udawson, although I can't complain about anything about that game. But the correct move here is king to h8. And the idea is that, well, it saves the exchange, and it's also kind of a preparatory move. So on knight takes f6, bishop f6, bishop h6, or g takes f6, bishop h6, black has rook to g8. If the king were back on g8, the rook would have to go to e8 or f7, and in either case, the next two moves would be bishop to c4 and then bishop to f7. Or at least that's, yeah, bishop c4 is rather annoying there. So, yeah, but after knight takes f6, gf6, bishop h6, the rook's happy on g8, and if bishop to c4, no problem, rook to g6. Okay, so he played knight to h4, which is the correct move here. And I knew this was the move, but I hadn't looked at it in quite a while, so I had to refresh my memory here. And I have to be careful about some tricks. I mean, white's idea is to take on f6 and then play queen h5 with little tricky things involving knight to g6. So, for instance, on knight to e7, bishop f6, g takes f6, queen h5, and yeah, if black's not careful, he's going to get hit by knight takes e7 and then knight to g6 check. And notice that the queen can't come over; it's kind of stalemated. So I'd like to play queen e8 if I could, or take and play queen e8, but obviously I can't do that. So the only move here for black is king to g7, and after rook a to d1, you know, it's at least a slightly worrisome position for black. I mean, this rook lift is in the air via d3, so slightly comfortable for white. So the right move is the one that I played after a few minutes thought, knight to d4. He played bishop to c4. I played b5, which is important. Bishop d3, and now c6. Okay, and all of this is in fact theory. And here, white can take either way on f6. So he can play knight takes f6, g takes f6, bishop to e3, say rook to g8, king h1, and rook to g4, if I remember correctly, is the move. And on g3, yeah, rook to g8. I remember looking at this this variation years ago in that old Schliemann book. I forget who it's by. I think, who wrote this book? I think S. Ivanov, one of the Ivanovs. There's many of them. It's like 3 authors. It's this book that came out of the Soviet Union. Actually, quite a good old book. But anyway, I remember studying this line over a decade ago and finding it kind of funny that white makes a stutter step with the bishop going to c4 and then d3, and black brings the rook from g8 to g4 and then back to g8 again. But anyway, the theoretical verdict on this is that black is okay, but playable for both sides. So that's playable. That's one idea. And then the move that I was more, I wouldn't say more concerned about, but that seemed more to the point during the game to me was bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and then knight to e3. So black has some play on, you know, has some good pieces. And this kind of thing spooked my opponents. He was afraid of my dark squared bishop and the g file, and didn't really think much of the f5 square as an asset for him. And I would say the f5 square it doesn't just win the game, but, you know, play c3 and queen f3 and put a knight on f5. The thing is, though, the reason why this position is equal, or, you know, maybe white is microscopically better in these two lines, I'm not sure, but, you know, roughly equal. The thing is, black has these assets, but they're disconnected assets. So, yeah, the bishop on c5 looks terrific, but he's got no help in the fight against f2. And likewise, the rook is terrific on the g file, or looks really nice, but if he plays g3 or maybe king h1 at some point, I don't really see how to ramp up this pressure all that much. Likewise, or conversely, white has this great square on f5 that he'll be able to use, but, well, where's the help for it? So both sides, to some extent, suffer from what we could call non-coordinating assets. So some nice features in the position, but they don't really work together all that well, at least not yet. Now, after, or at this point, I think my opponent was already down. Yeah, I got to check the score sheet. It was either 7 minutes or 17 minutes after he played bishop to d3. And here he thought until he had 2 minutes left for the rest of the game. Only, you know, he had 5-second time delay, so it wasn't just the 2 minutes, but still ridiculously low on time. And again, out of fear of the lines that I just showed you, he came up with the move b4. So again, the idea is he's just afraid of my dark squared bishop, so he's willing to take some serious risks to swap it off. But this is just a bad move. It was only played once before, and black played something stupid there, like bishop to b6. Of course, what I did was right, not because I did it, but it's just the natural and obvious thing to do, and it's quite strong. So just c takes d5, and after b takes c5, knight e6. And white just has too many things hanging. I mean, I'm attacking the bishop. If he plays bishop f6, which is what he does, I play queen f6, and then I'm attacking here. I'm attacking the c5 pawn. I'm attacking the e4 pawn. Just too much. So takes, knight f5, knight takes c5, and right now I'm up a pawn, and white really has little to no compensation. Maybe knight to g3 keeps him floating for a bit, but yeah, it's definitely a very good position for black. Instead, again, with barely a minute at this point, he played bishop takes b5, and he's just lost. Knight takes e4, knight e3, d4. Okay, now he's got 47 seconds left. Now, I thought about playing queen f7, which is maybe the best move, but I decided to be tricky with queen to g5 and paid off right away. So he played bishop to c6, bishop h3, and now it's really all over. I mean, this is a position to resign and accept that he didn't have any time. He was under a minute. So g3, rook a to c8, and all right, so I'm already up a pawn, but obviously I'm winning at least the exchange here. And then f2 crashes. He played f4, and this costs even more stuff. E takes f4, rook f4, knight takes g3, and here white more or less simultaneously resigned and lost on time. And he could almost get mated here too, so it's pretty bad. But again, really, it's just kind of interesting. I mean, it was in effect because he was too afraid of this dark square bishop, which again, once the f-file is closed, and since white has good control over f5, I mean, it's just I don't really have any big way for the foreseeable future to make this bishop do anything. But out of a kind of a fear of a ghost, he played b4, and what was a perfectly playable position just becomes very bad. Well, not lost yet, but worse, and with, let's say, with great potential for falling into an even worse state of affairs, which is what happened. Okay, so on to the last round. And actually, this game I'm not going to show very much of. I'm just going to show some key moments in this game with Stamnov. So it's a very nervy game. I mean, basically, most of the way went back and forth between me having a serious advantage and being a little bit better, and he would keep going, getting some counterplay, and went back and forth, always with me being at least somewhat better, but not really ever consolidating when I had a serious advantage. So the first key point I'm going to show is from here. And at this point he played f5, which makes some sense. I mean, if he didn't do that, I was maybe going to play queen f3 and knight to f5, or put the knight on d5, something along those lines. But maybe b5 should be played here. Anyway, he played f5, which, it's quite weakening for the light squares, but Stamnov is a very active, very tricky kind of player, and he wants to drum up some trouble on the f-file. So, okay, we swap everything off. I play queen d3, rook f7, knight e4, queen h4. Okay, and so here I have f2 defended satisfactorily, and here he makes a tactical inaccuracy. He played king h8. I mean, the position is okay. I mean, it's roughly equal, but this is inaccurate, I think. I played c5, and now he's got to be a bit careful. So I'm from having the inferior structure, now I get the better structure, but after this, I have to be careful about his kingside prospects. So here, there are tricks like e3 always lurking in the air, and I've got to be careful. So here I start making some pins. So I play queen c4, pinning the pawn. Plays rook f4. Okay, I play queen e6, so now my queen covers e3. And now I play queen e7, pinning his queen. Okay, or pinning the rook to the queen. All right, so from here, he ended up sacking a pawn. Not that he really has much choice. And yeah, around here, okay, so we got to a position like this. And here I'm definitely much better. But again, we're getting into real time trouble, and the game starts getting kind of out of hand. All right, maybe, I don't know, maybe I should play rook to g3 here, and only then e6. Or, it's also possible to consider moves like c4. But I played a6. And so my thought was, okay, if he plays rook a7, then I play b5. So, illustrate this, b5, protecting the pawn. And the point is that on cb, I have queen g6 check, and I pick up the rook. But Standoff plays e3, and now I have a decision to make. Okay, if I play f takes e3, I'm letting him to the back rank. If I play queen e3, I lose my a6 pawn. Well, I decided to grab the second pawn and hold on. Okay, so b5 takes, and I'm still up 2 pawns here. Okay, he checked. I played g3, rook here. And, okay, actually, let me stop at this point. E takes f4 is probably, well, not probably, it's definitely the safer way to go. But my fear was that if somehow I lost the c pawn, after e takes f4, the rook ending then would be a draw, whereas after g takes f4, with having a passed e pawn, the 3-on-2 would by no means guarantee a draw. So I felt that my king would be safe enough even after g takes f4 to get away with it. So, I don't know. It's just a decision you have to make. Rook e7, queen d3, and okay, everything is fine and dandy here, but now I get sloppy. So here, maybe king to g3, maybe rook to g3. There are a few moves that are quite okay here. The move I made was not one of them. I played rook to d2. So finally, after defending against cheapos for 30 moves, I let one slip here. So queen f3, and now I was not so happy. So, okay, I realized, all right, rook takes e3. He can't play if it was his move because I have queen d7, and I have a quick mate, queen d7, queen d8, rook d7, and so on. And if queen takes e3, then the rook ending is not necessarily so bad. So I played c5, so if he plays queen e3, I trade queens, play rook c2, and I'm probably winning the rook ending. Certainly he's got to suffer there. But then he played h5, and oh no, he's got h4 next, and all of a sudden I was really starting to get upset. So fortunately I found still a way to keep it going here. I had to give back one of the pawns, but, well, it was going anyway. So queen f6. So that stops h4, hits the rook. He still can't play rook takes e3 because of rook to d7 check. So he plays queen e3, and now I play rook to g2. So this still keeps the c pawn alive. Now he played rook to g7, and here maybe I should play c6. Yeah, c6, and I'm still all right. But I thought queen e5 was okay. I think I maybe overestimated the rook ending after takes and takes. So I'm not sure. So queen takes, let's say takes, f takes, rook c7, rook c2, g5, king g3, king g6. Yeah, this is not really what I had in mind, to put it mildly. So yeah, this just looks like a probable draw. Most unfortunate. So let me think. Is there anything I can do here to keep the fun going? Not good. Yeah, well, I can play c6. All right, so I have to play c6, king f5, rook c5. So maybe here I still have some chances to fight. All right, so it's not completely over yet. Maybe he can come around the backside though, king e4, threatening king to d4. Okay, but maybe I'm just in time like this. Okay, yeah, that seems to work. Happy days. Yeah, there's definitely not going to be any fortress draw in a variation like this. Yeah, I mean, this has no chance. This is an easy win for white. Do whatever. What would I do? Probably queen f5. Nah. I'll start just checking. Here, here, here. And this check, and then queen h6 check, and I take on h5, and it'll be easy. Okay, of course that isn't all forced, but okay, at least it shows that I can keep the game going, so we can't just force an immediate draw. But okay, what if he just does nothing? So let's see if he does g4. Okay, if I take and play king h4, he has rook h7 check and drives me back, and he goes back to c7 with his rook. I could play h4, but then he's got a passer himself. Let's see, so h4. Maybe this is all right. So king e4, e6 should win. And if king e6, then king f4. Yeah, I think I'm happy here. Okay, so maybe this is all right. Okay, so maybe the game does still go on, and this king f5 idea just doesn't lead anywhere. Okay, so let's say he plays king e6. Then, all right, well, king f3. And, yeah, I just make some ways to move now. I don't know, let's say to c3. Maybe c2. And, yeah, and he's just in Zugzwang here. So, okay, I think, so all right, not the end of the world. All right, after queen e5, another idea is to play queen f3. And then here I think I was looking at f5 as the main choice at this point. So if queen takes, you can't take either way. If he plays gf5, of course, this is mate. If he plays queen f5, then I take, and I queen. My pawn's too far advanced. So he'd probably have to play g5, and then I think I can consider f6. So rook f7, queen g5, and I think I'm all right here too. Again, he can't play rook f6 because of mate. If he plays queen f6, then I have queen h5 check. Oh, and that just, yeah, that wins everything. So so that's all right. So maybe he plays rook to g6. Okay, but anyways, you get the point. It's the game goes on here, and black still has to fight. But what happened was incredible. After queen to e5, he thought that my f-pawn was just underprotected and played rook to f7. So, well, what else is there for me to do? Queen takes e3. So, a really remarkable anticlimactic finish there, but, you know, sometimes that happens. I mean, you know, you're in a tough game. You're battling for a couple of hours. You know, it's working hard, a lot of tension. You know, the game's been complicated for a long time, and sometimes that happens. You know, I had a little blackout. Fortunately, that wasn't fatal before when I just missed that he had queen f3, and you know, he had his own blackout a few moves later, which fortunately for me was far more serious than my mistake had been earlier. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. So that was my tournament. All 4 games of it, or let's say 2 full games of it, and or a good chunk of 2 other games. Not sure when the next event is. We'll probably be playing in the Chicago Open. For those of you who are familiar with the U.S. chess scene, I guess that'll mean something to you. For those of you not in the U.S., it may not. But anyway, that's about a month and a half from now. So hopefully I'll be playing there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed all these games, and I will see you next time. And it probably won't be one of my games next time, but that's okay. Anyway, thanks a lot. So long. Bye-bye.